In that forgotten stretch of land where seasons rotated with an almost biblical stubbornness, and where time itself seemed to fold in on itself, there was a barn. It wasn't just any barn, not one of those tidy, picture postcard barns with flowers in the window. Ours was built of raw plank, so old that every crack told a story, and the smell, oh, the smell was an inseparable mix of ancient dust, dry hay, and the sweet, almost forgotten residue of molasses that once fed the animals. It was a place for cows, for storing hay through harsh winters, and, of course, for secrets, those secrets too heavy to be spoken in the kitchen, in front of the wood-burning stove, under Mama's watchful eye. But in our barn, there was an anomaly. Something that simply didn't belong, that screamed its dissonance in the dusty silence. We had a mirror. Not a tiny hand mirror, or a broken shard of glass. This was a mirror. Ancient. Imposing. Large, bigger than any window in our farmhouse, with a dark, intricately carved wooden frame that looked like it had wandered from a European palace, confused by some cosmic error, and ended up in our American Midwest. It was nailed to the farthest wall, crooked, of course. That mirror was never straight, as if the very reality it reflected refused to be organized. The glass, opaque with time and dust, held a depth that went beyond any mere reflection. And Mama, with that rustic wisdom that only life in the countryside teaches, had her own rule about it. She always said, in a low voice, almost a whispered warning, "Don't stare at it too long, Mary Ann. Don't confront it. Mirrors don't like to be stared at. They hold more than they show." I never quite understood why she gave that warning, but the seriousness in her eyes told me there was something deeper there than mere superstition. It was a warning that seeped into my memory like the scent of dew at dawn. I was a curious child, one of those drawn to the forbidden and the mysterious. So, I used to sneak into the barn, during moments when Mama was busy with chores or tending to the house. I'd climb onto the hay bales, which scratched my legs and smelled of stored summer, and sit there, huddled, my knees almost touching my chin, watching that giant mirror. I'd squint my eyes, as if expecting it to blink first, to reveal some secret held within its dusty surface. It was a silent game between me and the glass, a dance of gazes that only my imagination understood. Hours would pass like this, while the world outside continued its rhythm, and the silence of the barn was broken only by the occasional buzz of a fly or the rustle of wind through loose planks. And I swear, with the same certainty I feel the earth beneath my feet, it happened. One summer day, one of those days when the heat was so dense you could almost chew it, and the cicadas, with their shrill, incessant song, seemed louder than any thought in my head. It happened. I was sitting there on the hay, my eyes fixed on the mirror, my breath held, waiting. And it blinked. It wasn't a reflection of the sun, nor a trick of the light filtering through some crack. It was a quick flash, a subtle contraction, as if someone behind that dusty surface had suddenly flinched, or startled. A blink almost imperceptible, but to my childish eyes, it was as clear as the sunrise. My heart pounded in my chest like a frightened hummingbird. I scrambled down from the hay so fast, with such a sudden surge of terror and excitement, that I tripped over the rooster scratching in the yard, falling into the dust. The rooster clucked indignantly, but I didn't care. I ran. I ran like never before, the wind whipping my hair, my legs aching, and the image of that blink was etched into my memory, a secret all my own, more real than any counting of sheep. Granny May never told stories without a reason, without an underlying lesson, without a piece of her soul intertwined in the words. Her narratives were like the old river nearby, slow but deep, carrying the weight of the life she had lived, each wrinkle on her face a page from an ancient book. She, with her pipe always at hand and a gaze that saw through things, had her own way of explaining the inexplicable. And the barn mirror, of course, was one of her favorite subjects, but always approached with a gravity that dispelled any light-heartedness. She would say, between puffs of tobacco smoke and the crackle of embers in her pipe, her voice raspy from time and toil, "That mirror in the barn, Mary Ann, isn't for looking at your own face, no. It's not for that. It's for warning. It's to alert you." And the word alert was spoken with a cadence that made it sound more like admonish, a premonition. She explained that once a year, always near harvest time, when the land is exhausted and spirits are said to be restless, the mirror might blink. It wasn't a flicker of light, or a trick of reflection. It was an insinuation of another time, of another place. And if it blinks, she would continue, her eyes fixed on a distant point, as if seeing the past before her, it means someone is coming. But it's not always someone living, my dear. Sometimes, it's someone who has already passed on. Her voice would become a murmur, almost a whisper against the wind, a thread of mystery that entwined itself around your soul. It wasn't like the horror movie stories the town girls told, full of blood, hysterical screams, and demonic apparitions. No. The mirror's visits were different. They were subtler, more ethereal, more profoundly disturbing. "There's no blood," Granny May would assure, "no scream that tears the night. It's just a visit. Unfinished talks. Echoes walking, Mary Ann, with boots made of silence. They come to close a cycle, to say what was left unsaid, to take what was left behind." It was a type of dread that didn't rely on fear, but on melancholy, on incompleteness, on the sensation that the veil between worlds was thinner than one imagined. She would recount the story of my great-aunt Loretta, a woman who lived on the neighboring farm and was so practical she didn't believe in ghosts or hauntings, until the day the barn mirror blinked for her. Loretta saw the mirror blink, Mary Ann, Granny May would remember, and her voice would become an almost inaudible thread, and that very night, her husband, Uncle Jake, who had died almost a year ago from a fever, showed up at her door asking for coffee. Dead or not, Granny May would finish with a husky chuckle that sent shivers down my spine. He still liked his coffee sweet with 2 sugars, and a piece of molasses candy. I never knew if she was joking, if it was one of those stories for children to fall asleep fearing the supernatural, or if it was the absolute truth. But the way she said it, with her fixed gaze and that enigmatic smile, made me believe. The fact is, the mirror stayed there. Untouched. Dusty, but with an imposing presence. Silent, yet full of maybes, of what-ifs, of untold stories and truths that only time, or perhaps the glass itself, would reveal. The legend took root in me, growing with each passing year, nourished by the mystery of that incongruous object in our barn. It was a constant reminder that, in the countryside, the line between what is and what was, between what lives and what departs, was sometimes thinner than one could imagine. I was a grown woman when it happened again. Not an impressionable child, but a woman who had seen life twist and unfold, who had her own calluses on her soul and scars on her skin. It happened on a scorching day, the kind only the American Midwest knows. A real, dense heat that seemed to melt the very air. The kind of heat that made chickens lie down in the shade, pretending they were dead just to avoid moving, any expenditure of energy. Sweat streamed in rivulets down my forehead, and the smell of dry earth was almost unbearable. I was hanging some bundles of dried herbs near the barn entrance, my fingers agile, my mind wandering in trivial thoughts about the next harvest. That repetitive work allowed me a kind of rural meditation. It was then that I felt it. I didn't see it first, I felt it. The air. The air became heavy, almost dense, as if the whole world had held its breath. A sudden, crushing silence fell over the barn, muffling the buzz of flies and the rustle of leaves. A sensation that something immense was about to happen. I turned, my movement slow and cautious, as if every fiber of my being knew I was about to witness something that would defy logic. And there it was. A flicker. A blink. Not quite in the center, but in the corner of my eye, a quick movement, a flash. The mirror. The old, crooked mirror, covered by a thin layer of dust that didn't seem to dull its depth. I swear, by all that is sacred and by every memory in my heart, that it blinked. It was a shimmer, quick and sharp, that didn't come from the sun. No angle could explain that reflection, nor from any known light source. It was a flicker that came from within the glass, from a place my eyes couldn't reach, but that my soul recognized. If the glass moves before you do, don't go asking who's behind it, Granny May's voice echoed in my mind, clear as if she were right there beside me, whispering the words into my ear. It was a warning I had heard countless times in my childhood, an admonition that now took on a new and terrifying meaning. But stubbornness, that same stubbornness that made Grandpa Jed buy a peacock for the farm, was a trait that ran in my family's veins, and it hadn't left me in adulthood. I was headstrong, and curiosity was a fire that burned within me. So, that night, I waited. It wasn't an anxious wait, but a wait filled with a silent apprehension. I prepared myself as if for a confrontation, or for a long-delayed encounter. I opened the barn door just a crack, enough to see, but not to be seen. The night breeze carried the scent of dew and damp earth. The stars twinkled in the sky, indifferent to the mysteries the land held. I knew I was about to witness something that would change the way I saw the world, and perhaps, myself. The quietness of the night was merely a prelude to what was to come. And my heart beat a dull rhythm, a drum of expectation in my chest. The barn seemed to breathe that night. Every plank, every beam, every crack in the wood creaked louder than usual, as if the very structure of the place was preparing for something, stretching its old bones. The air inside wasn't just heavy, it felt like it had elbows, nudging and poking, an invisible presence that surrounded me, enveloped me, made me feel I wasn't alone. I sat on a three-legged stool, the same one Granny May once used to milk the cows, now a throne of observation. The old lantern, hanging from a central beam, swayed gently with the draft that entered through the cracks. Its yellowish, trembling, and faint light cast dancing shadows on the walls, making everything inside seem to be moving, gaining a life of its own. It was the kind of light that didn't illuminate, but made everything seem to be remembering something, whispering ancient secrets, bringing dormant memories to the surface. The hay bales transformed into dark mountains, the harnesses hanging on the walls looked like ghostly shapes, and the mirror, there in the corner, was a dark and enigmatic stain, a portal to the unknown. And then, amidst the oppressive silence, I heard it. The subtlest sound, but one that resonated through every nerve in my body, freezing the blood in my veins. Footsteps. Boots. Slow. Heavy. On the dry hay, the footsteps dragged unhurriedly, without the urgency of one who is alive and bound by time. There was no haste in them, just a strange cadence, as if time were an illusion for the one making them. I held my breath, the sound of my own heart echoing in my ears. From the darkest corner of the barn, where shadows were densest and impenetrable, a silhouette began to materialize. It wasn't a defined figure, but an entanglement of shadows that unfolded, slowly gaining shape. And from the mirror, not another blink that startled me, but a hum. A low, soft, almost inaudible hum, like a lament or an ancient hymn murmured from the other side of the veil, coming from an infinite distance, or perhaps, from a terrifying proximity. The sound filled the air, more a sensation than a sound, vibrating in my ribs. And then he stepped forward, emerging from the shadows, bathed in the flickering lantern light. My brother. Not a blurry memory, not a translucent ghost. Him. Exactly as I remembered him before the cough took him, before the sickness transformed him into a shadow of his former self. The same slouch, slightly bent, as if the weight of the world was always on his shoulders. The same thick eyebrows, too bushy for his own face, which always made him look thoughtful, even when he was just staring at nothing. His eyes, once weary with fever, now held a serene glow, almost of peace. But that wasn't right. It couldn't be. He had passed in 76. The earth had claimed him, prayers had accompanied him to eternal rest. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. No greeting, no lament. Just a slow, gentle nod, as if confirming my presence, as if acknowledging the silent invitation the mirror had made. And then, he held out his hand. In his palm rested a familiar object. A pocket knife. The pocket knife I had lost the year he died, an object I had searched for months, a painful reminder of our last game, a secret only the two of us knew. The knife with the worn wooden handle, bearing the initials J.A. etched into it, the same ones he had carved with his own knife into the pecan tree by the creek. The air grew thick with emotion. I knew, in that moment, it wasn't a dream. This was my brother, somehow, from some time, there, with me, in the barn. We didn't say much. In fact, we didn't say a single word. There was no need. That moment, his presence there, the delivery of the pocket knife, everything spoke louder than any words ever could. The communication was of another order, deeper, more ancient than language itself. I extended my own hand, not to touch him, a part of me knew I shouldn't, that the barrier between our world and his was too delicate to be broken by a touch, but merely to feel closer, to bridge the distance between the now and the past, between what is and what was. My finger hovered inches from the pocket knife, and I felt warmth, a subtle vibration, almost a breath of his existence. He smiled, a sad and tender smile, a smile I knew so well, as if he knew exactly what I was thinking, the thousand questions, the avalanche of memories, the longing that squeezed my chest. He sat on a bale of hay, as if it were the most natural thing in the world, as real as any living person. The hay didn't sink as it would with an ethereal body, but held his weight with unquestionable solidity. And we just stayed there, in the quietness of the barn, under the flickering lantern light, sitting in silence. A silence that wasn't empty, but full. Full of years of absence, of words never spoken, of unfinished games, of shared memories that only he and I understood in their entirety. A silence that was an entire conversation, an embrace of souls that transcended the barrier of life and death. Sometimes, that's how people say what truly matters. Not with grand speeches or dramatic farewells, but with the quietness of presence, with the weight of a shared memory, with a simple gesture that carries the universe of a relationship. It was his way of telling me he was okay, that he loved me, that he remembered. And my way of saying the same back, without a single sound breaking the magic of the moment. I felt the pain of loss, yes, a sharp pang, but also a deep peace, the feeling that, finally, a cycle had closed, a loose end had been tied. He looked at me again, his eyes, once filled with a light I didn't entirely recognize, now with a familiar gleam, that gleam of an older brother, a little playful, a little serious. And then, his voice, the voice I thought I would never hear again, the voice that was music to my ears, broke the silence of the barn. A whisper, almost a materialized thought, "Don't stare too long, Mary Ann. The mirror doesn't forget." The words were an echo of Granny May's voice, a link between generations, between past and present, between legend and reality. The phrase carried a weight, a warning, a blessing. It was the certainty that memory, the true connection, didn't need a mirror or a barn to exist, but that the mirror, somehow, was the guardian of that memory. And then, the lantern, as if the magic of the moment had consumed its flame, flickered violently. Once. Twice. And when I looked up, my eyes having been fixed on the pocketknife in my hand, trying to understand the reality of what was happening, and looked again at the hay bale where he had been sitting. He was gone. There was no trace, no smoke, no sound of retreating footsteps. Only the matted hay, a slight depression, as if someone had truly been there, and the silence of the barn, which returned to being just the silence of an old place. But the pocketknife. It was still there, in my hand, cold and real, the weight of its existence an undeniable testament to the visit, the silent conversation, the farewell. The initials J.A. etched into it seemed to glow, a seal of his presence. I never told my children. They wouldn't believe it, and I wouldn't want them to try. Some truths are too heavy to carry, some experiences are so personal they become sacred, and some magic, when explained, loses its enchantment. I didn't want their curiosity to lead them to the same threshold that led me, to that tenuous place between what is visible and what is felt in the soul. I let the legend of the mirror, as Granny May had told it, continue to be a whisper among the trees, a secret of the small community. That mirror? It still hangs there. In the same dark corner of the barn, in the same place where it was put so many years ago. It's still crooked. It's still dusty, the dust of years and memories covering its surface. It's still silent, never blinking for me again. But I keep it clean now. Not to see my own face reflected, not to admire my image in the glass. But perhaps, to allow the past to see out. So that the memories it holds, or the presences it invites, have a window to this world, a path to the light. It's a gesture of respect, of acceptance, of a quietude that only comes when one embraces the inexplicable. Sometimes, when the night wind, that familiar prairie wind, whispers through the cracks in the barn planks, making the walls creak with an ancient melody, I swear I hear the footsteps again. Those slow, unhurried steps, the rustle of boots on dry hay. It's a remembrance, not a haunting. It's the echo of a presence that has become part of my story, my family, my very being. And Granny May's voice, that wise and husky voice, returns to whisper in my ear, a wisdom I now understand in all its depth. If it blinks first, Mary Ann, it's not the glass waking up. It's your memory calling. It's your longing made real. So, if you have someone who's gone, but who, in some way, is still present. Someone you still feel sitting at the table after dinner, an empty chair that still seems filled. Someone whose scent you can still catch on the wind, or whose laughter echoes in your dreams. Don't fear the blink. Don't fear the visit. Perhaps they just miss you too. Perhaps farewell is never goodbye, but just until we meet again, an encounter postponed by time and space. And perhaps, the greatest magic in the world is the ability to love, to remember, and to feel the presence of those who, though unseen, still watch over us. The mirror in the barn isn't about fear, it's about the eternity of connection. It's about the love that defies death and the barriers of human understanding. It's about what truly matters, and what, in truth, never leaves us.